So what are server actions and how can we use this server actions concept to handle data submissions with Next.js? Well, first, it's important to understand that server actions are actually not a Next.js specific feature, but actually a feature that is supported by React itself if you're using React in an environment where this feature works, which is not the case in your standard React project, which might be a pure client-side React project, but which in the end can be unlocked by frameworks like Next.js that wrap around React. So this React feature, this server actions React feature, is in the end unlocked by frameworks like Next.js. Still, it is a feature built directly into React that's then made available by Next.js, to put it like this. But what's the idea behind server actions? Well, let's create an action and let's handle the submission of this form here, which you find in the new post folder in the app folder in that page.js file. Let's handle the submission of this form with a server action and along the way learn what a server action is. So to handle the submission of this form with a server action, I'll actually start by handling the submission with a non-server action, with just a form action instead. And that's another feature built into React itself already, though at least at the point of time where I'm recording this video, it's not stable yet, but it will eventually be a stable feature that can also be used in client-side React applications. So in all React projects, even if you're not using a framework like Next.js. Because there is a difference between a form action and a server action, as you will see. And the idea in the end simply is that React gives you a way of handling form submissions on the client or server side in an easier and simpler way than it used to be in the past. And a form action simply is a function you define either directly in the component like this or in a separate file, that doesn't matter. And you can give this function any name of your choice. For example, create post could be a fitting name here. And you then pass this function, which we created here, you pass that as a value to the action prop on the form element. And that's new. This action prop is actually a default attribute you can set on the form element, even if you're not using React. But when using React, React takes over that prop and that attribute, so to say, and handles it slightly differently than it would normally work. Because normally, on the form element, if you're not using React or a React version that doesn't support that form actions feature, the action attribute that can be set on a form element in the end defines the URL to which the browser will automatically send a request once the form is submitted. So that's a default behavior built into the browser. This action prop or attribute normally defines the URL to which the form data will be automatically submitted once you press a submit button inside of the form. That's what this action prop normally does. Now, when using a React version that supports form actions, or Next.js as we do, this action prop will work slightly differently. Instead of accepting a URL, it will accept a function, and React will prevent that browser default behavior of sending a request to some URL and instead trigger that function when the form is submitted. And conveniently, it will then give you a form data object, which it will pass into this function as an argument automatically, which allows you to extract the data that was entered into the different inputs of that form. And that form data object is based on that form data interface, which is also a standard thing in the web not React specific, which in the end defines an object that contains various methods, like this get method, that you can use to extract the data that was entered by the user. So we can use this form data object, which we get automatically here, to call the get method to get hold of the different input values entered by the user. And we do get hold of these different values with help of the name prop and attribute that's set on those elements. And that's therefore also important. When using such a form action, as we're doing it here, and that's also important, this is not a server action yet. It's a form action, but it will soon become a server action. When you're using such a form action, you must set these name attributes on all the inputs of which you want to extract their values, because it will be those name values that you now use with the get method, like here get title, to extract that input's value here, to get hold of any values entered by the user. So that would give me the title value entered by the user. And we can now repeat that to also get hold of the image file with help of form data get image. And yes, it does work with file pickers just like that. You can also extract those files. And soon I'll also show you how to then upload and store them in a safe way. And we can get hold of the content that was entered here with help of that content name, which is set on that text area. So with form data get content like this. And now here, for the moment, I'll just console log title, image, and content so that we can see whether it works or not. And that's all. That's how we can define a client-side form action, and soon it will become a server action. We simply create a function that accepts that form data argument, and we then use this function as a value on this action prop. We don't execute the function here. We don't set those parentheses. We just use it as a value. Well, and now with all that done, if you save everything, you see we get an error here, at least at the point of time where I'm recording this. I'm getting an error that I should use this use server thing here on this function. And I just mentioned that this here should work. Well, yes, in theory that should work, and you find a similar example in the official React docs, but it will only work if you're using a React version that supports that feature. And at this point of time where I'm recording this, this feature isn't stable yet. So it might work at the point of time you're viewing this, but it does not work yet here for me. But that's no problem, because that's just the first step towards such a server action, which I actually want to build and which will work. Because even if this would work here, this will just be executed on the client. So we would gather all that data, but we then would still have to send it to a backend, for example, with help of the fetch function manually. And that could be a separated backend, or it could be an API route defined as part of our Next.js project. Still, we would manually send a request from the client side to some backend. And just as with data fetching, where we also could fetch data from the client side, this would work, but it would not be the best possible approach here in a scenario where we own the data source that should be changed. So where we own the database in this case. And therefore, we'll move on and now turn this into a server action.